Terry, all this is going to take. Sorry, Double A. All this is going to take time. You need to accept that we're going to have peaks and troughs. Surely that applies to Ange Postecoglou then. But we've been ridiculed and mocked and taken the piss out of all the way through this rebuild.
It's because of how bad he ended his season. And
hang on, Ego. Hang on. I want Terry to
let the Man U fans rep themselves.
Sorry. Can you ask it again, please? Ask it again.
Well, you said you've got to understand when it's a rebuild, people have got to be, patient. They've got to be calm. There's going to be times we play really well. There's going to be times we suffer. The manager said you're going to have to suffer. And yet all I hear on here is everyone taking the piss out of Ange Postecoglou, and he's in the same position.
So there's two things to that. Firstly, I think we've got to learn to differentiate between banter and analysis. So, for instance, someone said, Terry, you were gassing your manager up the other day when he was walking out of a restaurant. Again, Rodman, I was being sarcastic, saying, oh, look at him. Didn't he look great? That's a joke. That's not real analysis. Secondly, let me ask you a question back. And I don't like to answer a question with a question, but I need the information to answer correctly. So it's not me trying to send you off in another direction. When you say it was a rebuild under Big Ange, barring Ange coming in, what else changed at your club at the same time?
How do you mean? Oh, what do you mean at the ownership level?
Ownership, sporting directors, change the direction footballing wise. What was the fundamental change? For instance, when Newcastle got taken over, it was new owners, directors of football, but the whole club changed and started its rebuild at that point. And then Eddie Howe came in. Because I don't consider a rebuild to be when a manager's appointed. So
it wasn't just a manager.
Aston Villa didn't start a rebuild when Unai Emery came in. Aston Villa have been building to this point for the last 6 years.
Yeah, but we've brought in Scott Mann, Johan Lang, Paratici's taken a back seat and moved away from the club. So there's been changes in the back end.
Yeah, and you lost your best player.
I'm not saying you haven't done this.
And we lost our best player.
I'm not saying you haven't done any of this. But when Paratici's taken a back seat, has the club gone in a completely new direction? Have you, has it been documented or discussed that you're changing your style of play? Are you going after a different type of young player? Like when Chelsea changed ownerships, we can all agree that Chelsea Football Club went in a completely new direction, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that is a rebuild of a football club. When FSG took over Liverpool, the Liverpool's rebuild didn't start when Klopp arrived. It started when FSG did, like five years earlier. And I think that's the problem when people talk of rebuilds. I don't think a new appointment of a manager is necessarily a rebuild. It's a continuation of what's already started. It's like a new foreman on a building site.
I don't agree with that to an extent. No, I don't either, because Conte, Mourinho, Nuno, all really defensive managers. We had the best player we've ever had leave. Ange has brought in a whole new philosophy from the bottom to the top. It changed so much behind the scenes as well, and bringing in new and different staff. And yet he's not getting it needs time. He just gets slated that, it's who we are, mate, and the piss taken out of him every 5 minutes. It's not. It's different. You've got to be consistent if you're going to give.
But again, I'm asking questions here because I want to understand where you're coming from. And so if you're saying that you generally had massive change internally at that time, then I'm going to take your word for it. I'm not arguing with you about that. I was just asking questions. I don't necessarily think it's when a manager change happens. If you're saying the style of football changed, the profile of player changed, fair enough. I would say this,
Chelsea, Terry. It did at Chelsea with our new manager, with Enzo Maresca. We're a completely different side. I mean, in terms of playing style, identity, all of that has come from Enzo Maresca. And I think a lot of Chelsea fans would agree. So technically, as Kate has said, that is a rebuild with a new manager, completely kind of pulling apart. Because if you look at Chelsea this season and last season, we can all say that it's pretty much a completely different side. The way players are utilised, the system, we didn't have an identity. Maresca has ensured that one has been installed. All that is the manager's work.
Sorry, one sec. Sorry, let me respond. I absolutely understand where you're coming from with that. Maybe it's how I view a club. So for me, you're spot on in terms of the managers come in and he's coaching different and he's giving them new ideas. When I talk about Man United's rebuild, though, we're not talking about a squad that the club has been putting together over the last 3 years for a specific style. We need to still rip our squad apart and rebuild it because it failed. Where with yourselves, you added to it this summer like a normal club did. But the players that you're getting a tune out of have been part of your club's plan, part of how you've been building for the last couple of years. So I don't look at Enzo coming into Chelsea this summer the same as Ruben Amorim taking over mid-season with the situation that Manchester United are in. even our owners and the people that are making our football decisions have still just getting their feet under the table in that regard. But I do understand it in terms of a new head coach and new tactics, etc. To your question, Kate, though, I can't answer for other Man United fans. I can only speak for myself. And I am very balanced when it comes to Big Ange, because I haven't said at any point that I think you should sack him. Of course, I've had fun at times, there's no doubt, because we all banter each other's clubs. But one of the biggest bits of praise that I've given to Ange at times is like I did on Saturday, when I saw him adjust, when I saw him actually do something different. When he speaks about this is how we play, there's one way to play, we're only going to do it in that particular manner, I think it's crazy. He's not managing Celtic in Scotland anymore. What we saw on Saturday, not yesterday, was somebody play good attacking football, was very compact and hard to break down when he was out of possession, dropped his defensive line that little bit deeper, especially after you went 2-0 up to cope. That is where I think constructive criticism is needed. But what I've agreed with you on the whole time is I think sacking him would be crazy if the club, though, isn't going to change its ethos at board level. And that's the one thing I would say to you. Your style of football may have changed, but the one thing that hasn't at Tottenham, and this is according to yourself for 20 years, is your club's ethos and the direction it's going in and what it holds most dear. When it comes to Man United at this particular juncture, everything at our club is changing. And when you've got that much change happening at board level, football level, manager level, and squad level, anybody that thinks it's going to click into gear as quickly as it has done at Chelsea, who didn't change every aspect of their club this summer, it was the head coach. And of course, there'll be other facets. I don't think it's right to expect Man United to click into gear as quickly as Chelsea have. Equally, I would expect Chelsea to click into gear quicker than Spurs, because I still think Chelsea are a better run club overall and have better players. And you've got to look at all of these different facets, I think, when judging rebuilds.
Yeah, I was going to say something, and now it's completely gone out of my head. This is why I write things down, because I'm used to this. I'll have to think of what I was going to say.
But then, Terry, does that mean... Sorry, Kate. Sorry.
That's fine. Go on, carry on.
I was just going to say, though, Terry, does that mean that you would absolutely accept that Amorim could fail now? Because you're saying kind of when the club does go through as much, change and rebuild, and I can vouch for that because our club literally was stripped, 2.5 years ago when ownership did change. Absolutely everything changed, from backroom staff, a lot of players. There was a complete, wholesale turnover in every single foundation brick. And then obviously when Graham Potter arrived, that failed massively, right? But then after obviously Frankie was interim, and then Pochettino was meant to be the one then that took over and kind of, made everything work, and then that failed. So is that you saying that potentially Amorim can afford to have like a Pochettino spell where he was sort of like number two of kind of coming in and fixing this, and it failed? Would you accept that?
I would. Again, I don't want it to happen, but I am very, very, very conscious to the fact that Amorim still may not be the person that wins us the trophies, because we don't know. We know how good he's been so far, but we don't know how good he's going to be at Manchester United. I love a lot of what I've heard. I love what I saw at Sporting. I love that he has an identity, and hopefully he doesn't move away from it. But of course, I'm open to the idea that it could potentially fail. But for me, the way I see Chelsea built now, and I said this back at the time of your takeover, I said that you needed a change. I think you made mistakes in the beginning, but I always understood, and hopefully Igao will back me on this, he was on the show back then, what you were trying to achieve. Roman's way of doing it, just spend, but don't build any underneath foundation, I felt didn't work in this era because loads of other clubs had money. In Roman's first 10 years, you were so much richer than pretty much everybody else, and you had a great core that he built. You could go and buy a few players, bring in another top manager, and it was working. So if you look at the second half of Roman's era, he started winning and challenging a lot less than in the first 10 years. Still a brilliant owner. I felt what you needed was a subtle change where you had a real club model where there was a set style of play that was the same at under 8s level right through to the first team, where you bought a specific type of player, where if you sacked a manager, the new coach coming in could pick up from the previous manager and go, look at that squad and go, I can get this squad winning. What I think football clubs need to get away from in the modern day era is a new manager coming in, like we've had 5 times on the bounce, and saying, got to get rid of 18 of these 23 players to make my system work. I think when you do that is what I call a rebuild, essentially, of a squad, where every new manager wants to rip a squad apart and start again. That's where, for me, Man United's situation has gone wrong in the last 11 years. And I've said it at the beginning of every appointment of every manager. Jose is a great coach, but if we don't change the way we operate as a football club, he'll foul. Same with Ollie, the same with Ten Hag. That's why I'm excited now, because we have very publicly declared that we have a set style of football and a certain type of player we want to sign. And over the course of the next 20 years, we are going to hire head coaches to manage that group of players each time. And that, for me, is why I look at this as a genuine rebuild from top to bottom of the club. And of course, I'm open to the idea that head coaches can fail. But for the first time in 11 years, I feel more comfortable if we have to sack a head coach now than I did prior, because you're not starting. What you won't hear me say, so my energy will be the same whether people agree with me or not. If Ruben lasts 2 years and we do well, but we sack him, I will not say at the beginning of the new coach, rebuild starts again from here, day one. The rebuild starts now. So in 2 years' time, when a new coach comes in, we're 2 years into a rebuild. I don't think clubs can just keep going back to square one with a new head coach, because clubs don't operate in that way anymore. You know, Fergie ain't running the club where it's all his idea. It's run by the sporting directors. It's run by the board. I actually think they're every bit as important, if not more important, than the head coaches at times. So for me, I'll keep the same energy. You won't see me say there's a new rebuild if Ruben Amorim does foul.
Can I just jump on to Nina's question there just about Amorim as well? Because I think it actually goes deeper than Amorim, because the jury's still out on Ineos and his new structure, because we don't know if they're going to be successful. So he very well could fail. But for me, and I know a lot of United fans, we need to see if they're going to back up everything they're putting out there, because we don't know how successful they're actually going to be as a structure. And the thing he needs is absolute backing. And by backing, I don't mean buying players. I mean getting rid of the players, because that's clearly what needs to happen. You know, the last manager spent 600 million, and what's he bought? Because you look at that squad now, and you'd happily get rid of half of them, if not a little bit more. So Amorim very well could fail, because we have the history and the record to show you that every manager that's come into the club has effectively failed in some way or whatever. So I think, go on.
I was just going to add on to what you're saying.
How? No, go on. How have I confused you?
Because you fought me on this quality squad that can fit in the top four last time. You're now saying half the squad isn't quality. So I'm just confused, isn't it? Right. So what level do you think this squad is at? Because I'm hearing a bag of excuses now after you've had one.
Okay. So I think this squad could get top four, but do I think this squad could win us a league where I want to be? Absolutely not. So therefore, So therefore, the squad's not good enough then. So
but you believe this squad can get top four with the current quality you have in it, yeah?
Because they have,
and then
before,
you can rebuild
because they have before, and I think a lot of them are probably the replacements we bought in more often than not. So the jury's out on one or two, but the others, the replacements,
one or two. You just said half the squad, bro.
No, I'm saying replacements you brought in this summer. One or two of them, the jury's still out. Euro and Xerxes, jury's still out on them. Where the other three, I think, have been good. So I think they could get top four, but I don't want to be languishing, reaching top. That's an Arsenal thing, searching for top four. That's what they used to do all the time. So I'm not doing that. I want to win Premier Leagues. I want to challenge for the Champions League again. Therefore, half this squad is not good enough to do that, to get me to the promised land.
Don't be disingenuous. I've seen you on streams talking about we should get top four. Now all of a sudden,
I'm just waiting him to talk. I'm just leaving him to talk.
But I've just said that again. I've literally said this squad could get to top four.
Unnecessary shot, because you're
hang on. At the start of this season, hang on. But at the start of this season, though, loads of pundits and loads of YouTubers that are non-United fans had us in the top four.
Regardless,
so suddenly now, Double A saying the squad. But the squad probably still has good enough quality to make top four. Maybe not from this point because of how bad the start of the season was. But there is a fundamental difference here. I think we're nitpicking between building a squad that all of you do this, and I know Chelsea fans do it. I don't know about Arsenal. Chelsea fans definitely do. That ain't Chelsea quality. What you mean in that statement is that isn't someone who's good enough to make us win league titles again. That is what Double A is talking about. I think everybody knows that's what he means, but we're nitpicking to try and catch him out when he's talking about trying to win a league title versus potentially qualifying for a Champions League spot. I thought that was quite clear in what he was saying.
Fair enough. I just want to say something. Kate,
Arsenal fans like to bite that.
Kate, you can't compare Ange Postecoglou, who had 2 full preseasons, to a manager who just joined the club with no preseason.
That's not what I've said.
He's
going to. What I said at all. No, I didn't. I said no.
And the reason why people can be more critical of him because they have a longer sample size where they've seen him have his team go 5 games where they've conceded the first.
I didn't say anything, Miguel. Watch your ear rolls out, darling. I said, if you're going to grant time to Amorim, as in 2 years, it's going to be up and down. Ange's 18 months in, and people aren't giving him time. That's what I was saying. But what I was actually going to say to Terry, you know, when I couldn't remember, I remembered. We have changed because we're now using data-driven scouting. We've got new people behind the scenes. Daniel Levy, backlist manager, is giving 400 million euros. That's never been done before. Whether I think we bought the right players is different. So things are changing. So
again, this is one of the reasons why I started the Football Terrace. I'm very open about this. I'm not a football encyclopedia. I don't profess to know everything. That's why we have the dialogue and conversation, and you've just put it out there so we now know. There is a